Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another World of Tanks video from me, Gitbag the Great. And today I thought we'd talk about a somewhat forgotten in my eyes tank on the German medium tank tech tree that you can unlock on your way towards getting the tier 7 legend, the Panther. And this tank is, of course, the VK3002M. Now, this isn't a bad tank at all, really. I mean, it's not the most flexible in terms of tier 6 mediums. It's certainly not the most manoeuvrable, but it's one of the quickest, and it's got a very solid, dangerous, sniper-like 75mm gun that's got a very good rate of fire. Essentially, in a kind of weird sort of way, it's what you would get if you morphed the Panther into a tier 6 version of itself, you know, just downgraded some of the stats and such and made it a tier 6 medium tank. And in a way, this is kind of a protithesis and sort of a prototype in a sense to the Panther, and it is a very solid machine. The Panther itself at tier 7 is of course a very formidable tank and is excellent as a sniper medium, combining it with a good straight line speed and just slightly above average manoeuvrability. And again, that's kind of the same thing with this tank, although it's slightly more manoeuvrable tier for tier as a tier 6 tank, but it's still a very solid machine. Compared to a lot of other tier 6 mediums, though, it isn't that manoeuvrable. I find myself having a bit of a merry dance to outmaneuver and dogfight with things like T-34-85s and Sherman Easy-8s, which are noticeably manoeuvrable. This thing isn't completely unmanoeuvrable, but at the same time it operates in, like I said, in kind of a similar way at tier 6 as the Panther does at tier 7, so take that with a pinch of salt. Its rate of fire is marvellous, I must say. The upgraded 75mm Kw.K 42 L70 is a brilliant gun. It gets 135 average damage on its APCR and AP, and 175 on its high explosive, with 150mm of armour penetration on its standard ammo and 194 on its standard APCR. So its APCR is more than enough to punch through the fronts of tier 7s, and its AP is enough to punch through the armour at most places on a lot of tier 7s as well. So if you use the mobility and speed of this thing to the advantage, which it has in plenty of amount, you can do a considerably good amount blowing off the tracks of higher tier tanks with this thing's very impressive rate of fire, considering that as it is now, with me having my crew at 100% halfway through their first crew skill and with no equipment at all, this thing can have a rate of fire of 14.9 rounds a minute and a reload time of about 4 seconds. So this thing, its main attribute, I would say, in regards to the gun, more so than the, or less so rather than the actual hull of its tank, is probably the rate of fire. The maneuverability isn't great. Its hull armour is only 60, 40, 40, and its turret armour with the upgraded turret is only 100 at the front with 45 at the sides and rear. And view range and signal range is actually pretty decent on this machine, so if you get into the right position you can possibly spot up some enemy tanks quite nicely, especially if you're in a higher tier game. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you guys into a couple of matches I've had over the last few days while grinding out this machine on the way towards getting the Panther, and hopefully you can get a little bit of more of a practical view for how this thing works on the battlefield. So first up on the replay side of things, where I show you guys how this thing does a bit more practically in the field, we have a match here I had on Highway not too long ago actually. I don't do exceptionally well in this tank, but I do well enough to get a solid rating on this match. How much damage do I do? I believe I do almost 1,500. But I don't do excessively a huge amount in terms of kills. Now, naturally, of course, I go to the same side as the other medium tanks on my team. Sometimes you will see some of the slightly slower mediums in a certain match of World of Tanks go into the town. Tanks like the Super Pershing or the standard Pershing as well, which isn't the most manoeuvrable, but actually is quite manoeuvrable, but it isn't the quickest, rather, I should say. So you'll sometimes see that in the town, but then again, with the decent gun depression that something like the Pershing or the Super Pershing has, they are very decent use over here alongside the ridges near the pumpkin farms. So first off we spot the T-34-100. Try to get some shots off on him, but he's a bit too clever for my liking. However, then he decides to come out. Very cleverly, though, proposes his frontal armour, but then he gets his tracks blown off. And I'm sure he must have, like, tracks at this point, or at least a repair kit. But he just seems to not want to use them, so take him out. Already done about 400 to 500 damage, and start putting the hurt onto the Cromwell. As you can see, the damage roll of this thing isn't particularly high. You do have to get quite lucky with it to get a considerable damage roll, and I don't know how I managed to hit that Cromwell. I mean, I'm not surprised that it didn't do that much damage when I was hitting him on the move, because this thing isn't the best at firing on the move, kind of like the Panther. But the fact that I hit that Cromwell anyway, I have no idea. And even more surprisingly, I actually managed to absorb some damage into my tracks from the Panzer IV-H, which is, again, very shocking, because kind of like, again, like the Panther, this thing just does not do well at side scraping. The side armour is quite thin, and it is very flat, again, like how the Panther was designed. The Panther has tremendous frontal armour, because even though it isn't that thick, it's actually angled very well. But the side armour is just as thin, if not thinner, and is almost completely flat. So side scraping in this thing is virtually pointless, and you'll get even tier 4s that are able to overmatch the side armour on this thing very easily. So I was very surprised when that Panzer IV-H actually managed to somehow dunk his shot into my tracks. And at this point, as you can see, we're kind of just overrunning them completely. It's just kind of a scramble to see who gets the last bit of damage done. I mean, it's a complete rout. We've got them 13-0. But they actually do manage to get a kill back with the KV-2 in a second. You'll see him do it in a minute. And God bless this KV-2, because he's doing everything he can. After he kills our T-34-100, he manages to, you know, pull back, tries to put himself out of the line of artillery, and try and get himself as much into the ditch of that point there that he has enough time to reload. But for some reason, he just seems to point his gun at the tank that is most manoeuvrable and he's least able to hit, the AMX right to our right. But what do you know, it's a complete rout, and fortunately I didn't have to get too involved in that game, but at the same time I managed to get a good bit of damage. I did at least 1,000 damage and got a fair bit of spotting damage there as well by blowing off people's tracks. So that just goes to show the sheer rate of fire that this thing has. It's good as a sort of like an all-rounder sort of support medium tank, but... And here we are on the mightiest and glory that is Erlenberg, in slightly more favourable matchmaking this time. I mean, the matchmaking the last match was pretty decent, but here it's much more comfortable, shall we say. We're much closer to the top of the team. Not too many heavies on either team. For some reason, we've only got one tier 6 heavy, the OI, while the enemy team have got 3 in the form of their own OI, a KV-85, and a Churchill 7, so all very, very heavily armoured tanks with different guns that are good in different circumstances. So they've at least got, you know, a very flexible brigade of heavy tanks. We've just got one very slow, heavy tier 6 heavy. Although, to be fair, the OI isn't terrible. I mean, it's a big, fat, ugly target, but at the same time it's got cracking armour and amazing alpha damage on that chunky big gun of itself. So it's a good slugging tank, really. A very good street fighter, actually, I must say. First off, we're going up here to just in front of the castle. Usually you'd expect more so to see medium tanks on this map, I find, around the hills on the other side of the river to where we are. But I'm deigning right now to just rush up, get into the low ground of this broken bit of wall here, and hopefully get some spots off or shots off on tanks that are moving in front of us, like that Hellcat there and the KV-85. Not much success so far. They've been spotted by other tanks, really, and I'm not in a really major position to get too much damage done on them. Try and pop off maybe a few shots, threaten, you know, the lower tier tanks that are coming across, things like that. And at this point I'm kind of thinking, what can I do from here? Because I've got tanks on kind of three sides of me, so I've not really got a major set of options to really manoeuvre around. And at one point I was thinking of rushing up and trying to outflank this KV-85 by pacing it around him. Then I spot the opposing OI, and he and their KV-85 put a world of hurt into our OI, who just gets absolutely pummeled and gets half of his health taken away in one fell swoop. So I decide, right, going around the front way isn't going to work. Try and go around behind and put the rapid fire of this gun to use. Somehow don't, you know, do any damage to that KV-85. The KV-1S comes barreling round, gets the absolute merry hell blown out of him by the opposing OI, and the KV-85 fortunately has been reduced to such low health that I can take him out in one shot. Same to the T1 Heavy, and of course their KV-1. And at this point I should note that we're 6-3 down, and I'm the only one to kill anything so far, but hopefully that should be remedied soon enough. Our team will start to pull their fingers out of their bums, but at this point I didn't really have that much faith. I mean, with 7-3 down, you know, we've lost the entirety of the other side of the map, so at this point I was kind of a bit worried, and I was really desperately trying to put some shots into this OI to help out our little buddy in the T-34 so he could hopefully live another day. Unfortunately he is, because the ROI puts a world of hurt into their one, and I didn't actually notice this when I was playing this match, but we managed to get back because not only did we kill their OI, but we also killed their Cromwell. And then one of their tanks, I think it's the Hellcat, drowns, but then we get pegged back a little bit by their Churchill 3, killing our OI experimental. So we're now pegged down a little bit, and we have got less of our more manoeuvrable tanks left now, so we're kind of confined to this one sort of like fifth of the map here around the castle and the ridge just to the side of it. So I tried to move up, put some shots into the Churchill 3, see the other Churchill 3 moving up, try and see if I can get some shots into him, but he's in the low ground. So I tried to put some blind shots into the Churchill 3 I saw first, hopefully tried to just, you know, blow off his tracks, getting some blind damage in there. Then I see the T-34-85 and I can think, right, even though he's kind of somewhat hulled down, maybe I can try and use my, you know, considerable rate of fire to my advantage. Try and go for the turret, because the turret at the front of the T-34-85 isn't supremely heavily armoured, but it's quite surprisingly bouncy. But at the same time I'm thinking, if I can keep pumping shots into him from the front into the turret, maybe I'll kill some crew members. And at that point I start getting pummeled from all sides by Churchills that for some reason I can't see at all. Even though the Churchill is a big ugly tank, I just can't see any of them. And then our T-34-85 just goes on a super heroic YOLO run, tries to spot some of the enemy tanks. And it's at this point where I start to feel a little bit more comfortable, because I was so engrossed in firing at that T-34-85 that I didn't really realise that our team had managed to pull it back to 8-11 and then 12-11, I mean 12-8, sorry, and I'm just trying to put some shots into this Hellcat. And the Hellcat's got even worse side armour than the VK3002M, so I'm more than able to penetrate his side armour, even if he you know, sidetracks or side scrapes his armour. And I decided to move up because I'm not really doing anything, just camping here anymore. All the enemy tanks on this side of the map have been killed, and that OI keeps slamming into the back of me and knocking me off balance. So I decided, screw him, and I'll move forwards and hopefully be able to get some more damage done. Because again, even though it was kind of desperate a few minutes ago, it's now turned into kind of roughly the same situation as the end of the last replay, in that now there's so few enemy tanks left and we're in such a dominant position that we've just kind of concentrated on trying to get the last bit of damage in. And at this point, I'm realising that even though it's quite a slim chance of doing it, I have quite a good chance of getting a top gun. And right there, I decide to let the fellow tanks on my team get the first shot into that Panzer T-25. Even though it could have potentially meant that I could have lost the chance of getting my top gun, and it was quite a callous thing to do, I decided to have a go, and I decided here to ask my team to let me get the top gun. Now, I believe in the same way that Jingle says that top guns and extremely rare medals and badges that you get on World of Tanks like that shouldn't be, necessarily be given to you. They should be earned. But at the same time, I felt pretty happy in what I'd done in this match. I did over 2,000 damage, with which a gun that does 150 average damage on its standard and premium ammo is pretty impressive, even when it's top tier. And considering that this was the first time I'd gotten more than 3 kills in this tank in a single match, I was buzzing, positively buzzing with excitement. And when I saw in the garage that I got a first class and a top gun and well over 1,500 experience on a premium account, I was pretty satisfied with that performance. Like I said, I don't think you should really necessarily ask for or expect top guns when even when you're doing this well in a tank like the VK3002M. But at the same time, I wouldn't object to getting one or my teammates giving it to me. I did feel like I had to, or at least compelled in a certain sense to ask politely. But at the same time, my team had done surprisingly well even after we'd been absolutely hammered in the earlier moments of that match. But regardless, they were, more than happy to, whittle down the last remaining Churchill 7 there and let me put the finishing shot in. So, very much thanks to them for being very cordial and honourable. And to be fair to the last remaining 7 tanks on our team, including myself, they did an amazing performance at managing to holding the line on that ridgeline just next to the castle and turning the tide of this match, which up until about halfway through was looking pretty damn desperate, especially when we had gone 7-2 down. So to this team, I would like to say thank you. It was a pleasure to play with you guys, even when it was looking a bit desperate. And as always, I hope you guys have enjoyed watching this video as much as I have had making it, recording it, and playing these matches. And hopefully you guys, if there are any of you out there who use the VK3002M, hopefully you will have as much, if not more so, enjoyment and success with it as I have. And if you are going towards the Panther, then good luck, because you do need a fair bit of XP to unlock it from this thing. I think it's at least 50,000 XP just to unlock the Panther from the VK3002M. But regardless, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, or at least found it informative. And as always, check out my 2 other YouTube channels, my Blogspot and my Twitter in the video description below. And until next time, I've been Gitbag the Great. Stay safe, have fun, don't do anything I wouldn't do. And until next time, I'll see you guys on the battlefield. Stay tuned, and bye-bye for now.